Kadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Yoma Mishnah. This is Daf Samech Zayin, but we're just going to start on the Mishnah and Samech Vav Bet on the bottom. Okay? Yeah. Where it says over here like this, we're talking about now the Sa'id. Remember that this Sa'id, which was thrown off the cliff, right, to the Azazel. So this Sa'id, which is thrown off the cliff, right, they were going to accompany it until the Sukkah Rishonah, until the first hut. Eser Sukkot Mirushalayim ve'ad Suk. There were actually 10 different Sukkot from Yerushalayim.
Okay, Papito.
Yeah, so he says there's actually going to be 10 different Sukkot from one until the other. Okay, so you got, remember, they're going from the Bet HaMikdash, they have to travel through 10 different huts, and then when they're going to travel through 10 different huts, they're going to get to the Suk where they're going to throw off the cliff this Sa'il Azazel. So it says here, Eser Sukkot Mirushalayim ve'ad Suk. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah, on the top, right, 67a, at the top it says there, the distance was Tishim Ris, which is Shiva Umechza Lechol Mil, which is 7.5 Ris for every single meal. So it says over here, right, according to this, right, explanation, he comes and he says it's like the Ris is 190 amot. So according to the Cheshbon, it comes out that the meal is 1,425 amot. Remember that every amah is 48 centimeters. Okay? Fine. Al kol sukkah vesukkah, on every single sukkah, omrin lo, right? They come and they say, hare mazon vare mayim, right? In order to understand that here's your water, right? And here's your food. Why? Because now if you really need water or food, you have it. So therefore, when a person has pat b'salo, meaning imagine right now I will tell you, by the way, the food is coming. But you don't have anything. So you're drooling over the food, you want food. Now I put the food here, even if nobody's going to eat, but the food is already here. It's already something. Right? Understand? So that's very, very important. Okay? Now it says here, Al kol sukkah vesukkah omrim lo hare mazon vare mayim umlavin oto misukkah lesukkah, right? And they're going to accompany him from one sukkah to another sukkah, chutz me'acharon, except for the last one, right? Because basically, since from one sukkah to another sukkah was the 2,000 amot, which is Tchum Shabbat, so they could only go from one sukkah to another sukkah without actually going outside of the Tchum. Chutz me'acharon shebahen, except for the last one, she'eno magia imo latzuk, which he doesn't go to the end, right? Why? Ela omed, because obviously it's going to be outside of the tchum. Ela omed merachok veroeh et ma'asav, but rather he's just watching. So he's watching from far. So Me'aya Oseh, what would he do? Chalek lashon shel zorit, he would split the lashon shel zorit. Chetzio kashur b'sela, half of it he used to tie on the rock. And then he used to come and tie the other half in between the karnot, right, which are the horns. Udchafo, then he used to push him backwards in order to push him down. Meaning he didn't even just throw him off the cliff frontwards. He used to push him backwards, right? So he says, V'umit galgel v'yored, and he starts just rolling down. Yeah, mitgalgel v'yored. V'lo haya magia lachatzi ahar, he wouldn't get until half of the mountain, until all of his limbs would start falling apart. I apologize for being so graphic. Yeah, but basically that mamash, all the limbs, everything would just completely start coming apart. Bavi yashav lo tachat sukkah acharonat shetechshach. By the Meshaleach, Chazara used to come, and he used to sit underneath the sukkah, right? So he says until it became nighttime. Okay, this is the Meshaleach. So he used to come and sit down in the sukkah until nighttime. Okay, so now when does he start becoming mitameh begadim? Once he comes outside, right, of the walls of Yerushalayim. Rabbi Shimon says, the second that he's going to come and he's going to push him off from the cliff. So that's when he's going to push him off. Okay? Tanu Rabbanan. Yeah, we learned in a Braita.
What they used to put the ribbon.
We learned in the Braita, right? There was actually 10 sukkot which had 12 milim between Yerushalayim and the Tzuk. This is the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Teisha sukkot, there were 9 sukkot and 10 milim, right, between each one another. Rabbi Yosef says, so there's 3 different opinions until now. Chamesh sukkot v'asra milim. There was 5, right, sukkot and 10 milim in between. All of them they used to make a new tchumin. right? In order that, because since it's going to be more, right?
Thing.
Exactly. So therefore they had to do a with chumim. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yosef, says Rabbi Yosef, Sachli Elazar Beni, right? So Elazar, my son, came and he said, Im alidei eruv yacholni la'asot afilu shte sukkot. So 1 second, if you're already doing an eruv, so then I could actually have 2 sukkot and 10 milin. Why? Because each one you're doing it far away from Yerushalayim, arba milin, right? And Anshe Yerushalayim are going to put their eruv, right, 1 mil outside of the city, right? And therefore they're able to accompany it 2 milin, 2 mil, right? And then with the right, v'hainu machzit Yerushalayim until the first sukkah. And then they used to come and have the other guy from the first sukkah come backwards and take him out, right? And take him forward. So therefore you could actually have 4 milin in distance. You understand how you had 4 milin? One more time. You have the city, 4 milin, right? But that means basically you're going to have 10 milin in between. But what happened? When I'm going to come, I live in Yerushalayim. How much do I have outside of Yerushalayim? Right? I've got 2,000 amot, right? 2,000 amot, 1 mil. But I'm not leaving my tchum inside Yerushalayim. I go outside of Yerushalayim 1 mil, and that's where I put my roof. Now that I have my roof there, how much can I travel? 1 more mil after, right? 1 more, I've got 2,000 amot after that. So therefore, I could do 2 amot outside of Yerushalayim, 2,000 amot, 2 times 2,000 amot, outside 4,000 amot outside of Yerushalayim, correct? Which is 2 mil. Remember, every mil is 2,000 amot.
Yeah, but
okay.
I'm looking at what is the.
One more time, right? What are we talking? So Kimana has the Hadetanya. So who does this go like that? Well, that which we learned in a Braita, Chutz me'acharon shebahen, except for the ones which are going on the last livui, which is basically the ones which is going on the last, right? The last accompanying. So therefore, they're not actually getting to the cliff. They're only watching from far away. Okay? So according to this, right, who's this going like? Kiman. Obviously, it's going like the Bimid. Because according to Rabbi Yudan, Rabbi Yosef, right, that he's going to be milaveh until the tzok mamash. He's able to go mamash until the actual cliff, right? And then throw it off. Fine. Says now the 2 dots. Al kol sukkah v'sukkah omrim lo arei mazon v'arei mayim. So on every single sukkah, they're going to tell him, here's the food and here's the water. Tana, we learned in the Braita, me'olam lo utzrach adam lekach. Right? The person who never actually needed, right, to actually eat on the path. Right? Ela but rather. Why are they telling him that? If nobody ever needed to eat, so why do you have to make sure that every single time you're telling them, by the way, here you have money, here you have your food, and you have your drink?
Why isn't it doche?
So Tana, we learned in a Braita, me'olam lo utzrach adam lekach, which means a person never needed to eat. So therefore, ela she'eno domeh mi sheyesh lo pa besalo, mi she'en lo pa besalo, which means that obviously if a person has the bread on the table, that's what we mentioned before, obviously he's much more calm. Why? Because he's, you understand, for example, right? We put here bread. Right now, a person, right, they're not supposed to eat before Shachrit. But if you have the bread here, you're calm. Why? Because you already know that, okay, I'm going to pray Shabbat, but I have my bread here. I've got the croissant. I've got it. Imagine there's no croissants. People go crazy. Why? They don't have anything. Well, we're not going to eat anything. They have a breakfast, right? We have to eat the breakfast. Okay? So, so then we said, what would he do? What would the Meshalech do? He would split the Lashon Shel Zorit. So he used to split this thread, right? Half he used to tie it to the sela and half he used to tie it in between the horns. So ask the Gemara, so why don't you just tie the entire thing on the sela? Why are you tying half on the horns? Anyway, you're throwing the right the off the cliff. So says the Gemara, Kevin the mitzvah basayir dilma kadimu malbinu miyat v'datei. He says no. Since at the end of the day, what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is to push off the sa'ir, right? To push off the he-goat, right? To push it off backwards from the tzok. Now, maybe what's going to happen is I'm going to start suspecting that maybe the lashon is going to come and become whitened even before pushing it off from the cliff. And then what happens is that he's not going to do the mitzvah. So imagine, it might already become white from the beginning. So therefore, they come and they tell him, put half of it on the sela, and therefore it would not become whitened until you finish the tying up of the other half on the horns, right? And because even if it's going to become whitened during the time that you're tying it on, there's no chashash, you're not going to push it off because you're doing it in that second, meaning that second that you're tying it to the horn, now you're going to come and you're pushing it off the cliff. So ask the Gemara, fine. So if you're going to do it that way, so why do you have to put it on the sela? Why do you have to put it on the rock? Put the entire thing on the horns, right? Tie the entire string on top of the horns, right? And that's it. And then when you see it going down, just check. Check. You see it going down, go check. So says the Gemara, he says sometimes what happens is that when it's falling off the cliff, it could put down its head, meaning that its head will be like downwards, and therefore you won't be able to see it. So because you won't be able to see the string, right, when it's going down the cliff, so therefore we always have to cut off half of it, and we're going to tie it on the sela. Therefore we always are able to attest, right, to what's going on according to the string which is going to be on the sela, right, and not the string which is going to be over there, right, which is going to be on his head. Okay? We're talking. We learned in the Braita, but Ishunayu Koshin Lashon Shel Zorit al Petach Haolam Mibachut. So at the beginning, they used to actually tie the Lashon Shel Zorit on the entrance of the Ulam outside, right? Hilbin. So then what happened was, if it became whitened, everybody was happy. Lo Hilbin, if it didn't become white, so then they were all sad and they were all embarrassed, because that means that they weren't forgiven. So obviously they would feel very embarrassed. Hitkinu. So therefore, because of that they would, feel embarrassed. So then they went and they did it on the inside, right? On the inside of the ulam, right? And still they would peek in to try to see. Hilbin, if it became whitened, they were happy. Lo hilbin, then they were going to be atzuvin, they were going to be sad. Here it doesn't say baishin, which is interesting, right? It says over here, okay, here it says that even though Yom Kippurim is Yom Adin, it's also still a Yom Tov, and therefore it's not Ra'uli Tatzev, right? Yom Tov. That's brought down in the Shoshanim LeDavid. Okay, fine. So, right, it says now like this. It says, so Lo Hilbin, Hayu Atzevin, Hitkinu Shiu Koshin Nato Chetzio Vesel V'Chetzio Ben Knaim. So then they went and they did it, right? They wouldn't do it in the Bet HaMikdash at all. They would do it on a stone right outside over there, where they're going to throw them off the cliff, so that way they wouldn't realize, meaning that the people in the Bet HaMikdash would not be able to see. Okay? So Amar Rabbi Nachum bar Papa Mishum Rabbi Lazar Kapar. Says Rabbi Nachum bar Papa in the name of Rabbi Lazar Kapar. At the beginning, they used to do it on the Petach Olam on the inside. But once they would already get to the desert, so therefore, once they already went there and they was pushed off, so then they would already become white, and they already knew that they did the mitzvah, right, of the pushing off of the Sayyid. But it says in a pasuk, which means that if your sins are going to be red, right, like shani, like the red wool, he says they're going to become whitened like snow. Okay, fine. 2 dots. Okay, we learned in the Mishnah, the animal would not, the Sayyid, the he-goat, would not get to halfway down the mountain until it would become completely dissected, and then you had all these different limbs flying all over the place. So it says over here, so we ask a question. Otan evarim main bana. Are you allowed to benefit from those limbs? Imagine you have limbs flying around. But those limbs, can you benefit from them or not?
No.
So says the Gemara, right? Rav Shmuel, it's a machloket, Rav and Shmuel. Right? Chadamar, one of them says mutarim. It's actually going to be permitted. Bana. Why? Because since the mitzvah is only throwing it off the cliff, so therefore, once you've done the mitzvah, so then that's it. You're finished. You've done the mitzvah. The mitzvah was throwing it off the cliff. You threw it off the cliff. It got all, completely destroyed. That's it. Now you could benefit. No problem.
Even if it's not white or not, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. Right here, there's a question: what happens if it didn't die? But that's something else. But here in Mamash, it became dissected. You have limbs all over the place. So now, if it was done the mitzvah, you could benefit. That's one shita. The Chadamana, one of them says, no, it's a surim. Why? He says, because according to this shita, the halacha is anything which is already done. The mitzvah is mutar bana, is not on the sira mishleleach. It's on other things, but not on this. Okay? So now it says over here like this. So it says, mandamar mutarin, according to the mandamar that says that it's going to be mutar bana, that you're allowed to benefit from it. Right? Sanot Zainam Ubet, 67b. Ichtiv, as it says in a pasuk, bamidbar. The shilach tzayid, bamidbar. What does it mean, bamidbar? Right? We already know that bamidbar, right, is already extra. It's superfluous. Why? Because it comes to teach you that after you already sent it, it becomes hefker like the midbar. Meaning just like the desert is a place which everything is ownerless, so to here when it says the shilach tasayid b'midbar, so therefore I already know that everything that's going to come out afterwards with this animal will be like the midbar, which means just like the midbar is ownerless, so too the animal is ownerless, and therefore you're allowed to benefit from it, and there's no problem of me'ilah, benefiting from kodshi. Uman de amar asurim. However, though, according to the man Amar that says that it's a sur ba'ana, that you're not allowed to benefit from these limbs. Tichtiv, as it says in a pasuk, right? Gezerah. What does it mean, gezerah? It says over there, v'nasa sira lav et kol avnotam el eretz gezerah. So it's mashma that it's a sur, right? Which means that it still stays in the same prohibition even after you came, right? And you actually got rid of it, right? Because that's what Rashi explains, that he says the pirush pashut of gezerah is to a land which is not miyushevet, which means that it's not actually inhabited. Right, that's what usually means. However, though, we already said which means we already said that it's going to the desert. So I already know that it's going to a place where it's uninhabited. So therefore, when it says gezerah, it's extra, and therefore gezerah is like a decree, something which is harsh, something which is strong. So therefore, just like a decree is something that I'm adding on to something which usually is permitted, and now make a decree. Here, it's going to be the same halakha, that it's going to be prohibited, even though I would have thought that it would have been permitted. So manda marasurin hay midbar mayavile. So now we have to actually find out what you do with each one. What does he do with the other pasuk? Remember one more time. It says in the pasuk midbar, right? It says also right, midbar, and it says also biyad yishtia midbara. It also says right, it's gezerah. Now one of them obviously something here is extra, so we have to find out what does each one hold with the other pasuk, because according to the first man Amar that he said it was going to be mutar. So he said, why is it mutar? Because the word bamibar is extra. Bamibar means ownerless. So too, this is ownerless. You're allowed to benefit from it. According to the other one, he's saying gezerah. Just like a gezerah is prohibited, so too it's going to be prohibited, even though afterwards dissected and it broke apart. So now what does each one do with the other one's pasuk? So says the Imam Amanda, according to the Amanda that says Asurin, what do you do with the word bamibar? What does he do? He needs it with that which we learned in the Braita. The Braita says, Hamidbara, bamidbar. Right, which means basically that it's going to be 3 times written over there, the word amidbar or bamidbar or hamidbara. It's all the same terminology, just in different, right, which is in the desert, right? So what does that mean? It says 3 times, right, in pasuk yod, kaf aleph, and kaf bet. So in 3 different pasukim, right, it says hamidbar, bamidbar, lerabot nov v'givon, shilo ubet olamim. So this comes to include the Bet HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, and then in all of them, we have the mitzvah of the Shiluach Sa'ir LaAzazel, which means after Bnei Yisrael went into Eretz Yisrael, they had the Mishkan in Shiloh. Afterwards, they had the Mishkan in Nov, and afterwards, they had the Mishkan in Givon. So therefore, and then afterwards, they had the Bet HaMikdash. So 3 times when it's written, the Midbar, it comes to include that we always had to do the Shiluach HaSa'ir, even in these 3 places as well, not only in the Bet HaMikdash, but also in the Mishkans, in the 3 different places. Okay? Fine. According to the other man that says that it's going to be permitted, so what does he do with the word gezerah? Right? What do you mean you're sending it to the gezerah? So he says, he needs it for, what does it mean in the Braita? The Braita says, what does it mean in let's gezerah? En gezerah ela chatucha. It comes to teach you that the gezerah is a place which is cut. What does that mean, cut? It says here that tzok was chatuch b'skifa, belo meshupa kol kach, which means that it wasn't actually slanted a lot. It was much more, how do you say it? Not slanted, but
Sharp.
So he says like this, another explanation. En gezerah ledavar mitgazer v'yored. Right? What does this mean? Here it says that we're talking about that you're sending the sa'ir to Eretz, to a place which is mitgazer sa'ir v'nechtachim, meaning it's a place where it's going to become, right? Like, gezer, usually we want to try to tear it up, right? Gizirei itzim, or all these things, whenever we're talking about gizirim, or also means tearing up, things which are torn apart. Okay, so because of that, when it says gizirah, gizirah means that it's torn. Davar acher, another explanation. What is gizirah? Shema tomar maaseh tohu. I would have thought that it's something which is like the abyss, which is nothing, right? Which is like rek. So he says, Samulomar, ani Hashem gazarti v'lecha reshut ha'hem. I was the one that made it like the decree, and therefore you're not supposed to think after it. You have no rights of thinking about it. So Amar Rava says, Mistabra kemandamar mutarim. It's more mistaber to say that the limbs are going to be permitted to you to benefit from. Shalom la Torah shalach letakala, because we didn't say shalach lishloach et sa'ir as a takala, that somebody's going to find it without knowing it, and all of a sudden he's going to benefit from it, and now he's going to get into trouble because he benefited from it. Okay, fine. Tanu Rabbanan, we learned in the Braita. Azazel. What is Azazel? Azazel is az el. What does that mean? She az v'kashe. You have to be az v'kashe, right? Because el is lashon kashe. So az is bold, courageous, and whatever. How do you translate over there? And kashe is hard, right? Yachol b'yishuv. I would have thought that maybe you're going to come and you're going to send it to the mountain, which is found in the yishuv. Tamulumar b'mibar. It has to be in the desert. How do we know they have to be a cliff, right? They're not just stem like a slope. Tamulumar gizera. Okay. Tanya Idach, we also learned another bright. What is Azazel, right? Kashe shebe'arim, a very strong mountain. V'echenu omer, and also said the pasuk, v'telei haaretz lakach. Tanya Vishmael, another bright, another, or the thing that they taught, the bright that they taught in the Kadam Ishmael, Azazel shemechaper al maaseh uza v'azael, right? On avon arayot, on immoral relations, right? So that means that's what it is, because these were the malachei Chabbalah that they came down during the time of Naaman, the Chotu Valkain, and it's written, v'yidu b'nei Elokim et b'not Adam, and then they went and they started sinning with immoral relations. So since these two angels sinned with immoral relations, so therefore it's to atone for these two people. Uza v'azael. Tarabanam, we learned in the Braita, et mishpatai ta'asu. Tivanim shilmale nichtivu, things which if they weren't written, dinu shikadlu, so then we should write it. Velu, and these are what it's written. Avodat kochavim gulur yevshuvut nevim b'gezel b'chut achat Hashem. Ve'echu kotai tishmeru. Tivanim she'asatan meshiv alehem. We're talking about the things which the Satan are going to come and they're going to answer. And these are the things. Right? That means basically these things are things which the Satan are meshiv alehem. What does it mean here is meshiv alehem? Here it says the Satan, he's meshiv tshuva li surim elu la'atot et Yisrael, to say, right? Well, it's not true. Because what does it help? Imagine with all these things, it doesn't even make sense, right? You're eating pig. So what's the big deal? You're putting on shanez or chalitza nivama or tara metzura. Well, it doesn't make sense even. So I'm going to say maybe there are maseto. There's nothing there. Tamulaman comes teach you ani Hashem chakaktiv. I was the one that named these things. You're not supposed to think over them. Fine.
That's just expression.
Exactly. Okay, 100%. So we learned in the Mishnah, when is it going to become metamem begadim? So there was a machloket whether they came out of the walls of the Yerushalayim or when they pushed it off from the cliff. Tana we learned in the Braita, Shalech metamem begadim ve'ena sholech is meshalech. He says the meshalech is metamem begadim, but not the sholech it's a meshalech, which means the people that are accompanying them are not going to be metamem begadim. So it's only metamem begadim these people. Right? So it says here, Yachol, I would have thought to say, once they come outside of the walls of the Azara, Tamulumar comes teach you Ham Shaleach. What does that mean, Ham Shaleach? Ham Shaleach, so it has to be towards the desert. So Ham Shaleach, if it's going to be the Shaleach, Yachol, I would have thought to say until he actually gets to the cliff. Tamulumar Vam Shaleach comes teach you Vam Shaleach, which means that he already started the Shlichut. He started his messenger. Ha-Ketzad. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. And once you got to the walls of Yerushalayim, those are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef says, Azazel, right? What does it mean, Azazel? V'chibes, as it says in Pasuk, right? You went out to the Azazel and then v'chibes begadav. So it says, Al shigia latzuk, until you actually get to the cliff. Right? Rabbi Shimon Omer, V'amshalech tzil Azazel yichabes begadav, sorko bevatrosh metavem begadim. The kavanah is that once you're going to throw it from the cliff, that's when it's going to be metavem begadim. So only the pushing it off, right? That means he's the only one that becomes mitamei begadim. All the previous ones are not going to become mitamei begadim.
Sounds similar to the chukah.
Okay, we're continuing now with the Mishnah. Okay, the Mishnah says on the bottom of Samach Zayin Amud Bet. Says the Mishnah, Balo etzel par v'sa'ir nisrafim. So now the Kohen Gadol is going to come by the par and the sa'ir nisrafim, which are going to be burnt. And then what happens is kira'an. So he tears it open. He's going to take out the limbs. The Tanam Magis. Right, then he's going to put them in a kli sharet, which is like a big a kara, like a bowl. And then he's going to bring them onto the mizbeach. But it says that the fats, right, of the sin offering is going to bring it onto the mizbeach. Kilaan b'miklaot, right? He used to put them on these. I don't know if you want to call them poles, sticks, right? These are like here we actually have a picture. One more time, share the screen. Here it is. Kilaan b'miklaot v'otziel bet hasrefa. Yeah, if anybody wants to come on this side, you could see the pictures. Right? So he says over here, you guys see it over there? Mubahaki. So Roberto, yeah, you guys see it over there? Here it is. You guys want to? Yeah, but you're right. We would have to. You don't have the screen anymore. Okay. But you have it here. It's okay. So it says here, so this is where it says, Kilan b'miklav v'otziel bet hasrefa. He's take it outside the bet hasrefa. Okay? So then it says, so when are they going to be mitamim begadim, these people that are being osek and these things, right? And putting on the again, this is the part of a Seir and Nisrafin. Once they went outside of the Chomat Hazara, Rabbi Shimon says, once the fire starts in the majority of the lambs. Says the Gemara, do you really think that they would actually do it right now? We know that the Haktara, which means actual bringing them, right, in order to burn them, is not going to be done until many, many different parts, until the Seder Avodah. When we're going through the Seder Avodah, right, it says he's still Lavush B'videi Lavan, right, during the time that he was doing the Avodah and the Kodesh Kodeshim in the Echal, right, and therefore, right, he still had to come and he has to do a whole bunch of other things. He has to put on the Zahav and this and that, and then he had to do his Ayil, the Aila'am, afterwards he had to do again Tevilat, change the clothing, because remember, every single time he changed the clothing, he had to do Kiddush Shtayim Raglayim before and afterwards, and then he had to do a Tevilah, right? So therefore he comes and he says, Ela'im, but rather you have to say, Laktirana Mizbeach. You're right, that they're putting it just to put on the Mizbeach, that they didn't do this yet, okay? That means they didn't do the actual Haktara until much later on. Kilama Miklaot, when they used to come and they used to put it on these poles. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Yochanan, Kemin Kliyah, just like a braid. Okay, what does that mean? This is, okay, fine, he's talking about, just says, Kilan Miklaot, these are Kemin Kliyah. Okay, fine, that they tied them on top of the maklot. Fine, now it says, Tana, we learned, Lo Yamenatcha Nituach Basar Oleh, Basar Olah, Ela Al Gabe Basar. So it says over here like this, we learned in the Braita that they wouldn't actually dissect the part and the sa'id, just like the basar of the olah, which they used to skin it, right? And even before the dissecting it, but rather or al gabe basar, which means they used to do it when the skin was still there, meaning by regular korban olah, which is the burnt offering, they used to skin it, and then afterwards they used to come and dissect it. Here, the skin was there, it was there. And then they used to start dissecting it. How do we know these words? The time we learned to write that Rabbi Omer Rabbi says, Ne'emar kan, it says over here by the Srefat Tapar and the seed of Yom Kippurim, or basaru peresh, right? So it tells you we just read this morning. It says by the Srefat Parakon Mashiach, right? And it also says, right, the same thing, or basaru peresh, right? But it says so he says over here, just like over there, just like over there, it's going to be that the nituach and ifshet, they're going to come, they're going to dissect it, and you have to also take off the skin. So to here, it's going to be al yidei nituach al yidei ifshet, and then we're going to bring down. How do we know this? Okay, fine.